Hi, I'm Matt Romoser, swine field specialist with the Iowa Pork Industry Center. And today I want to talk about gilt development, specifically around reproductive tract development and how producers can utilize this in their gilt selection strategy. So it's commonly known that early puberty or gilts that reach puberty earlier in life generally have a greater likelihood of being retained to later parities. It's really one of the more predictive tools and selection criteria we have with regards to sow retention. And shown here are just some figures from research and data that support that gilts in general that reach puberty prior to 180 days of age, in general, are more likely to make it to that parity 3, which is where we most commonly think is that inflection point of profitability or net profit for gilts contributing to sow farms. So what's the challenge in being able to identify those gilts that reach early puberty? Ultimately, it's labor intensive. It requires staff and labor to be able to effectively run a bore and be able to identify gilts that come into heat and really to stimulate puberty within a gilt pool. May have facility limitations, certainly in older facilities that weren't built or equipped with a sufficient size of a GDU, or the facilities to make it easier, conducive to run a bore, can make it challenging. Could be a farm that receives gilts that are maybe already mature or past that 28, 29-week threshold. So maybe they're missing out on the opportunity to identify those gilts that reach puberty earlier just based on how they receive gilts and get them from their genetic supplier. Or it could be a situation where their gilt demand for the week may override, unfortunately, that gilt development. So since thinking about if we're in a PRRS outbreak or if we're dealing with seasonal infertility and we need to meet breed target, oftentimes producers or caretakers on a farm may overbreed within the gilt pool and maybe just skip some milestones within gilt development. So that makes it a little bit challenging to really identify and be able to get gilts with an adequate number of heat-no services or find those early puberty reaching gilts. So some work was then done. Is it possible to identify gilts with greater reproductive potential and select them prior to reaching puberty? Meaning, is there a marker, is there a criteria we can look at independent of when those gilts first reach estrus? So some work that was done in this really wanted to explore when does that reproductive tract really start and undergo development. And we can see here some variation in follicular development exists in gilts prior to puberty. So shown here, we've got 2 different ovaries from 2 different gilts, both around that 100-day of age mark. Yet you can see dramatic differences in development where you've got one that's virtually undeveloped at this point and the other one that has substantial follicular development as well. So obviously we expect there to be variation within gilts, but also demonstrates here that it happens much earlier in life than we would expect with regard to selection and finding those gilts we would bring into the breeding herd. So from this, then, an experimental design was set up where we took roughly 155 gilts, all similar aged, and then took various measurements at the listed time points here at 75, 85, 95, 105, and 115 days of age. At those independent time points, we recorded body weight, ultrasound abdominally through the reproductive tract. We took vulva area measurements, so looking at both the width and the length. Took blood draws for hormone assays, and then sacrificed gilts at each of those time points to record follicular development and uterine weight. So with the remaining 105 gilts then that remained in production, those gilts were heat checked daily beginning at day 129 and continued bore exposure through 200 days of age. So to determine the association then between the phenotypes of those gilts as far as when they reach purity and try to correlate it back to those measurements at those various time points previously stated. So here's some of the follicular development data then, looking at how those ovaries developed at the respective time points. And it's interesting, you can see really at day 75 for those gilts, there was really no follicular development going on. There was still very underdeveloped at that point. But as we progress through those different time points, we gradually see more and more of those gilts start to have at least some degree of follicular development present, with the majority of them having at least some degree by day 105 and 115. So then taking some of those phenotypes we would have measured, specifically vulva width at day 115, and then correlating that back to the contemporaries and their age at first estrus, we can see a negative correlation with increase in vulva width being reduced in the age at first estrus, and in general, those gilts with a smaller or narrower vulva width in general were more delayed or took longer to reach that first estrus. So when we look at vulva area association and the percentage of those gilts that were able to reach puberty by 200 days of age, you can really see at day 75 and 85, there really is no relationship that we can discernibly see with regards to vulva area and ability to reach puberty by 200 days of age. But you begin to look out towards the later time points at day 95, 105, and 115. We can start to see that those gilts that were below average or less than one standard deviation from the mean really started to become reduced by 15 to 20%, less likely to be able to reach puberty by that 200-day mark. So interesting in the fact that really around those sensitive time points where we start to see some of that follicular and ovarian development also served as a potential precursor with their ability to reach puberty by 200 days of age. So some conclusions and applications then from this work. It was determined that prepubertal vulva width was negatively correlated with age at puberty. Variation in vulva width had predictive value for identifying those gilts with a higher likelihood to achieve early puberty. And then potential use could be utilizing vulva width as a biomarker for reproductive ability during development and at selection time. For more information on this particular work, you can see the published works shown here. And with that, and with Iowa State University, I'm Matt Romoser.